Welcome, everyone. Again, when we do something like this on Zoom, we have kind of the same feeling of being in an audience. We look around, we see who else is in the other chairs, in the other boxes. I see many faces that are beloved to me. I'm so happy to see you. And wow, I can just say personally what an important moment this is for me to be with Deena as she brings out this extraordinary new book. I've known Deena for 35 years now. We have to add it up since 1989 when I first became her student. So we have traveled life together as colleagues, now intimate friends. So deeply important to me to be here with my beloved. And then to be here with James Janko. Some people call him Jimmy. He says lots of people call him Janko, who I only met a couple of months ago by reading his extraordinary book, The Wire Walker. And I would love this book anyway, but it's important to me because I have a brother-in-law who grew up on the West Bank. So my sister married him. She lived on the West Bank for many years. My nephews was born there. So I have a deep connection to this story. And I feel that Amal is, that main character, is so alive that it's hard for me to believe she's a literary character. She's so alive. So I'm thrilled to have you all here for this afternoon. We're going to be, we'll hear from Janko, who will read. Then we'll hear from Deena, who will read. Then we'll have some time for all of us to have, for Deena and Janko to have a bit of a conversation about the books in these times. Then there'll be some time at the end for Q&A. So please put your questions in Q&A as they occur to you during the reading. And then our beloved Kristen Flintz is going to be checking those so that at the end she can kind of amalgamate them into a few questions. So do put your questions in the chat during our conversation. And Kristen, could you just come on for a minute so everyone can meet you, because you're going to be with us at the end of the event. Thank you, Kristen. So she's going to be tracking the questions. Okay, so I just wanted everyone to say hi. Thank you. So I am so happy to be able to say, I asked that Deena and Janko would each just briefly just give everyone a shout out or a hello or whatever before we get started. So starting with Deena, a couple words. Don't forget to unmute yourself, honey.
I'm delighted to be here. A pleasure to be here with you, Carolyn, with the team that has put this together. Really thrilled to do this with Janko. We have met over our work over the last year or so, and so glad to see so many of you who I know, some of you from the way past, and so many that I don't know. That's just as thrilling. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn, for the warm welcome. Thanks to everybody. It's really an honor to be here with you and Deena and everybody online. Some of you old friends, and most of you I don't know. So it's great to be with all of you.
So as we just acknowledge the world that we're living in and what we're all bringing in this moment to what we're in, I'm just going to ring the bell for all of us, just to welcome all of us, just to take a moment. 3 long, easy, deep breaths, welcoming yourself into this gathering, deepening your heart, opening your spirit, and calling out to whatever deities, guides, spirits, ancestors that are your beloveds. Thank you. So, I really want to particularly welcome and thank the ancestors, my ancestors, Deena's ancestors, Janko's ancestors, and the ancestors of all of us gathered here. Thank you for being with us, for giving us our lives, and may we be open to your guidance. I am now really thrilled to introduce James Janko. James Janko is an award-winning novelist. He's probably the person that you haven't heard about that is incredibly well famous and extraordinarily gifted. He is a gifted poet as well as a novelist, and his awards include the Juniper Prize from the University of Massachusetts Press for his novel that we're going to read here from today, The Wire Walker. He has won the Association of Writers and Writing Programs Award for his novel, The Clubhouse Feast. He's won the Northern California Book Award and the Association of Asian American Studies Prose Award for Buffalo Boy and Geronimo. And his novel, What We Don't Talk About, tells the story of his hometown in rural Illinois. I've recently heard some of his poetry. It's exquisite, and he's got a collection out called Love and Catastrophe. His short fiction has been in the Massachusetts Review, the Sun, the Iowa Review, the Eureka Literary Review, and his story called Fallujah in a Mirror won the Jeff Charlotte Memorial Award. And just a last note that Janko's life and work are deeply informed by his service in Vietnam. He was a medic in Vietnam, and during that period, he refused to carry a weapon. His medals, however, include the Bronze Star for Valor, which he returned to the U.S. government in 1986 to protest the military involvement in Central America at that time. In 2008, Janko gave away his combat medal badge and his Purple Heart to Vietnamese victims of Agent Orange, including a woman who was born without legs due to Agent Orange from her that her mother was exposed to, and another woman with thyroid cancer, Vietnamese. So we've got a Buddhist practitioner, a man of spirit, and a gifted writer. So I'm happy to welcome James Janko.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, for such a generous introduction. I need to give you a little bit of intro on my book, The Wire Walker. It primarily takes place in Nablus, in the West Bank, Palestine, in 2019 and 2020. And in many ways, I see it as a prequel to much of what has unfolded since October 7th. I first visited Nablus in 2017 because they have a circus, the Nablus Circus School, and a theater. It's a cultural hub. And I befriended the manager of the circus and the founder of the circus, who had been a medic in the Second Intifada. So a couple of medics together. My Palestinian friends took me to the Balata refugee camp in Nablus. This is a warren of alleys where approximately 30,000 Palestinians live inside 1 square kilometer. I remember walking down a Balata alley, and the sky was just a thin blue line over buildings 4 stories high, just a tightrope sky. So I knew I would write a novel called The Wire Walker. Now, the narrator ended up being a 16-year-old girl, Amal, from Balata, a wire walker. And she doesn't often go to the Nablus Circus School because it's far away. It's on the other side of town near the old city. And so she mainly practices in her alley. If you ask where I live, I might point to my alley or point to a wire. Sometimes my friend Maisa, a contortionist, shakes the wire I'm walking or tries to swing it out from under me so I can test my limits, find new limits. I watch YouTube, study what the great aerialists can do, and afterwards I practice, copy, before I find my own way to walk, jump, fly. Sometimes I set my wire less than a meter over the ground so mice can straddle it. I walk toward my friend, pause, crouch, her signal to hunch down so I can leapfrog over her and fly home to my wire. Sure, I fell in the dust 1,001 times before I learned how to do this. I've been taught not to brag, but I will say this in writing. I am brilliant on a wire. Mice and I have a new place to practice, a house half fallen near the south end of the camp. 4 years ago, the Israelis began to bulldoze this home, then realized they'd meant to level a different home in a different alley. Anyway, I tie my ropes and wires to poles and pillars, a spider web of rigging, and walk back and forth in the ghost of a home the Israelis refuse to rebuild. Maisa practices her poses, twists her body into difficult positions behind a wall that leans outward and will not crush her should it fall. So that's where she lives. She lives with her mother and her grandfather and her twin brother. And her grandfather, Saeed, is very influential in her life. Amal lost her father at age 4. And so he has the role of both father and grandfather. In this scene, he's telling Amal how her father saw the situation, that is, the Palestinian-Israeli situation. Your father said to me once, every time there's a bombing, Israel's leaders mourn the dead on one side of their hearts and celebrate on the other. The violence, the dead, they're dead. Give them permission to do as they wish, with the world's blessing. Imagine a man in a box, no room to stretch, so he grows smaller or tries to, until the day he blows himself up, scatters in all directions. Whoosh! He divides himself, leaves the box by exploding out of it, and maybe he kills a few of his enemies, which gives Israeli leaders permission to come after us, any of us, and to lock us in jails, innocent or not, and to plow our trees and crops into the earth, or to annex us, to take our hills and vineyards and fields, to be their hills and vineyards and fields, to raise Palestine hectare by hectare. So that's what's been happening for many, many years. Now, Amal's life is one of sharp contrasts. She has a phone, and this is her connection to the world beyond the Balata camp. She has a blog, she writes about circus, and she posts videos to display her skills. She makes an online friend, Tali Glasman, a juggler, Jewish Israeli, in a professional circus for Palestinians and Israelis in Tel Aviv. Um, it takes quite a while. It's complicated, but Amal, after clearing numerous bureaucratic hurdles and security checks, receives permission to practice and perform with the circus in Tel Aviv. Now remember, this is the summer of 2019. Such a thing would not be possible after October 7th. Now she has seen the Mediterranean Sea from Balata on her phone. She's seen the sea on a screen the size of her palm. And now she's actually there. And here's what happens. If I could block my memory, forget how I'm supposed to behave, I would jump in the sea and ride the highest wave. I am far from home on a gold beach where young women wear almost nothing. The sea is less naked, for one sees its surface, not its fishes and flowers, its hidden treasures. Fully clothed, my hair covered by a scarf, I walk beside Tali Glasman, a shapely girl in a two-piece bathing suit. She smells sweet like the oils and lotions she rubs on her skin. The only moisture on me is sweat. If I could be a magician for a day or even an hour, I would become invisible to everyone, Palestinian and Israeli. I want to swim naked and let only the sea know my beauty. The sun knows me, but the sea has never had a chance. My mother would scream if she saw me shake off my shoes, roll up my slacks, and wade in the shallows. A policeman watches me. Others watch as I jump and splash until I'm soaked through, and a delicious coolness seeps through my skin to the hardness of muscle. I'm telling the sea, here I am, here I am. This is your chance to know me. I wish I could take the smell of the Mediterranean all the way home to Balata. I want Grandpa Saeed and my mother and twin brother and everyone crammed in our alleys to smell the sea before they die. So she is in Tel Aviv practicing and performing for 12 days. And then she's back in Balata. And she's back for maybe 3 days before she is detained, arrested, which is a very common experience for Palestinians. In the course of the novel, Mal is detained 3 times. Children and adults are commonly held under a system called administrative detention without charges. They can be held indefinitely. This chapter is called Interrogation. The room is clean and white and smells of disinfectant. I sit on a metal stool in front of a desk. A woman in a green uniform on my left, and an enormous woman, doughy and round, a balloon or a baby in her belly, sits across from me in an oversized leather chair. Name, ID, I won't give her much else. Some years ago, she says, your grandfather spent more than 4 months in custody. The fact that we sometimes release detainees without filing charges does not mean they did nothing wrong. I remain silent. Occupation forces separate right from wrong, Israelis from Palestinians. If they could, they would tell the sun when to rise, when to set, when to separate from our few scraps of earth and shine on their skyscrapers and forests and fields, and the moon would need permission to pass through checkpoints in the sky, as would the clouds and every drop of rain. Maybe there will come a day when every Palestinian will be a contortionist on a wire. Did your grandfather ask you to practice on Faisal Street at a certain hour? Asked the interrogator. A neighbor or perhaps your brother? Saida, no one tells me where and when to practice. Besides, I did nothing wrong. You blocked the main route into Nablus for several minutes. No, that's not what happened. The tanks and trucks and jeeps could have passed beneath me. I'm a wire walker. All I can block is a sliver of sky. Now, Nablus is between two mountains, Jarzim and Ebal. In this scene, Amal is on Mount Ebal at night, where, according to the Israelis, she should not be. And she's trying to evade surveillance, drones, and what have you. It's like this. The night is clear, the air cool. The stars, a great bowl of them, are beautiful and frightening. I'm not sure how alive everything is. What has eyes and what doesn't? I hear something off to my left. A cat, I can't see what color, seems to look at me before it walks off, disappears. I have seen the stars over the Mediterranean Sea, over Jaffa. Grandpa has too, when he was a child in the city of his birth. But most of my people have only seen the sky over our alley. The stars a thin line like soldiers in formation. Now I lie flat, press my cheek to a stone as a searchlight sweeps over. I wonder who has a better view of me, the stars or the Israelis. Maybe I will escape my enemies because the light around me and inside me is unlike any they are trained to see. So Amal is unarmed. She has no weapons. She has earth and sky and the light of her body. Deena has called her a luminous girl, and she indeed is that. Um, she goes to prison a second time, and the second time conditions are more difficult, and she's put in solitary confinement for many days before she's finally allowed to leave her cell. I am stunned when two guards remove me from my cell and take me outside to the recreation yard. The light is so big I could be in heaven. If the Israelis fly all their planes through the blue, shoot their rockets and missiles and bullets, bulldoze our trees, smash our homes, turn our mountains into dust, the sky will return for everyone who survives. People can be trapped behind walls or bars or pressed into graves, but the sky has no bones, no flesh, no edges to its skin. Listen, Israel, fire missiles through the blue, and the wounds heal before the sounds echo and die. Do my enemies have a strategy? Maybe they're giving me a glimpse of the sky, so I'll panic the next time they cuff my hands, chain my legs, tie me to a chair, and throw me in a cell. I walk the cement paths, eat dust and light, a feast compared to prison food. So dust and light, earth and sky. These are Amal's solace. Um, she is back to taken back to Mount Ebal. The Israelis think she knows something about explosives hidden on the mountain, and they take her from a prison in Israel by helicopter. And once she reaches the mountain, she has um, a military escort. Near the crest of Mount Ebal, I walk with 12 soldiers under the open sky of an afternoon. A jeep follows in our wake, and three more are some 30 meters ahead of us. Machines rattle the earth while the sun makes a spark of me. I walk in mountain light, yellow and gold. I'm not sure what prison I was in, but they ferried me here blindfolded in a helicopter. I kept trying to see beneath the cloth or through it to hills, trees, roads, villages, landscapes. They darkened my eyes, but I tasted the sky of Palestine. Would they remove my tongue if they knew? Um, I'm going to read one more very brief passage. In March of last year, it was widely reported that the Israelis were using tanks in the West Bank for the first time in 20 years. They were in Jenin and Tulkarm. And I believe it was the first time they were used in combat in the West Bank in 20 years. But there were tanks in the West Bank during the timeline of this story, 2019, 2020, for training purposes and for intimidation. Now, I want to tell you the first time that Amal is detained, it's for not the common thing of throwing stones, which kids go to jail for, sometimes for years. She's detained for walking on the barrel of a tank. This is the ultimate defiance of a wire walker. And this experience gives her strength throughout the novel. I remember the night I walked above Faisal Street on the barrel of a tank. The past is the present. Then and now I strut in style, shiny as a fish riding a wave, the sun painting rainbows on her scales. I make myself a promise. I was born into a war, but I refused to die in it. That's what I meant to tell the tank commander and his soldiers. That's what I tell myself today. I walk on the barrel of a tank. Thank you. Now I'm going to pass the baton back to Carolyn and Deena. Thank you so much.
I'm breathtaking, wordless, gorgeous. Thank you on behalf of my family for illuminating that story, which is so hard to find and so hidden. Talk about art as resistance. A wire walker walking on the barrel of a tank, right? So there's something here going on about her art. She makes movies. She has a blog. She's a circus person, and then her ability just to be so deeply herself, or as Deena says, her light. The prose is gorgeous. I loved hearing it. Thank you so much. It was also wonderful to hear her introduce herself to the ocean for the first time. That was fantastic. So thank you. And how happy now. And just a reminder, if you have any questions for Janko, please do put them in the chat. And then we'll have that at the end. So just do that as you think of them, but the sooner the better, so that we can gather them up and kind of go through them. How happy it is for me to introduce Deena Metzger. There's really nothing better. I could do it the rest of my life and nothing else, and I'd be very, very happy to do that. As I say, I've known her a very long time. And my wife, Jean, and I have also known her. Deena married Jean and I. We're talking about something so essential about Deena. She just doesn't change. She's basically the person I met. Many things have happened. Of course, she has evolved and had new ideas and teaching different ideas. So all of that is happening. But there is something so core to you that is teaching me and has taught me all my life. So thank you. So many of you know, but for those of you who don't, Deena Metzger is an extraordinary novelist, a poet, a storyteller, and a healer. And she has been writing and teaching for more than 6 decades now. Deena has published more than 12 books, including the novels La Vieja, A Journal of Fire, that came out in, I think, 23. Beautiful. A Reign of Nightbirds. Another book, La Negra y Blanca, which was the winner of the Oakland 10 Josephine Miles Award, literary award from the pen. And The Other Hand, another of her very extraordinary novels. Her nonfiction books include Entering the Ghost River, Meditations on the Theory and Practice of Healing, and another amazing book, Tree, Essays and Pieces. She's published several volumes of poetry, including Ruin and Beauty, New and Selected Poems. So go get any and all of these. Deena's play, which she wrote early in her career, called Dreams Against the State, has received many productions in a variety of venues. And her classic book on writing is still in print since 1992. It is a mainstay for me. It's called Writing for Your Life, A Guide and Companion to the Inner Worlds. Go, if you're a writer, it's an extraordinary guide. As a healer and teacher, Deena has introduced Revisioning Medicine, something called the 19 Ways, which is a teaching for going to finding a viable future for all beings, human and non-human, or more than human. And all of these really are about creatively addressing life-threatening diseases, spiritual and emotional crises, and all of the disintegration that so many of us we know we're living through. She also every year offers week-long writing intensives and healer intensives. And again, amazing offerings not to be missed. So there'll be more information about those things in the chat. And then I want to just briefly say that I have tracked Deena as she wrote The Story That Must Not Be Told. Some of you know that I'm very attached to another novel she's writing, and tried to talk her out of writing this book and sticking with her novel. Thank goodness I wasn't successful. The Story That Must Not Be Told is wildly extraordinary and a very rare piece of literary work, a detective novel, and we are with the writer as she unfolds a story about a person living long ago and not that long ago, and who the writer met in the 1970s at the Women's Building in LA. You will hear more. I can't tell you how much I admire The Story That Must Not Be Told. I hope everyone reads it too. And I'm thrilled to welcome Deena Metzger.
Carolyn, thank you so much. The thing about The Story That Must Not Be Told is it is a book that apparently is always in process, because even in this moment, listening to Janko, I thought about a book we should have mentioned that I wrote after the first Intifada, and which we brought out again after October 7th and after the nonstop invasion of Gaza. And the reason I think about it is that there's such a connection between Janko's work and my work. And because when I heard him read about the detention centers, then the core of what The Story That Must Not Be Told came alive for me, because this book came to be to point out the relationship between what happened in Germany in 1933 and our time in the United States now. And I could not but hear Janko speak about how you could be detained without a warrant or without an accusation forever. And I thought, oh, and isn't this happening now in our country? And that's what this novel is about. I didn't want to write this book. It's the story of a woman who had been my student 50 years ago. I didn't remember her, but nevertheless spent, at the urging of her brother, almost 2 years of my life learning and telling her story, ultimately knowing more about her death than anyone, even her family. The book displays the process of discovery, mine and hopefully yours. This is Ina Andrea's intent. This is a ghost story because she is the ghost. Ultimately, she wants us to understand what it feels like to be so agonized by what one's ancestors did that she couldn't bear living, that she took her own life. What does it mean to have such understanding and shame of the unconscionable behavior of one's grandparents and great-grandparents, that one has to take one's own life? And then, 50 years later, returns to tell the story. Her industrialist ancestors significantly enabled and supported Hitler. I believe she has returned to alert us that the times we are living in, the actions of the regime we live within, are frighteningly similar to the times of her ancestors. This book, published in September, immediately after the manuscript was completed, maintains that the president's playbill for consolidating power in the US, supporting Israel's genocide war on the Palestinians, and his immigration policies and detention centers are so similar to Hitler's in Germany. In 1933, one may be deliberately following the other. Today, 6 months later, with Israel's increased assault on the West Bank after devastating Gaza, and the US attacks on fishing vessels, the takeover of Venezuela, the threats to Cuba, and the horrendous American-Israeli war on Iran, Lebanon, the Middle East, and the environment, we are witnessing the likes of a course from the Anschluss of Austria to the invasion of Poland and the beginning of World War II. Ina, the ghost, is very much alive now, but such a time killed Ina after the fact. She demands our awareness. She awakens us to the gravity of the situation and warns against inadvertently collaborating. We will be the ancestors. Our descendants will look toward to discover what we did and how we lived. So here is a collage of a few threads of the story, taken bits and pieces and put them together so you'd have a sense of the whole. And this is how it begins. Dear Wolfgang, this is the brother. Dear Wolfgang, you asked for a story. Or maybe Ina asked, or maybe Ina is asking. If so, we must not refuse the dead. Here is the story. It isn't once upon a time because it really happened. Nevertheless, it is a story. The writer received an email from a stranger in the summer of 2022 when we were still involved in the pandemic. Wolfgang Andrea was writing to her from Germany because he was investigating the circumstances of his sister Ina's death and thought the writer might be able to shed light upon it. It needed light because it was a dark death, self-imposed, a suicide. A suicide carefully planned and tested before it was realized. Dark, in the middle of the dark night, so it could be hidden. But so this time, the suicide would succeed. I wrote back politely that I didn't remember his sister and couldn't enlighten me. He said he would be visiting in the winter and asked if he could see me anyway. The writer couldn't refuse a man in mourning for a sister, so she agreed. Each knew nothing of the true reasons for Ina's death. They had to discover it between them, between us, as if Ina had just come to life to do the deed. The suicide happening again and again. He didn't come that winter. Later, he said he had had a heart attack, a mild injury to the heart. She understood immediately he had had heart failure. What remained strange was that it was 2024, and he was investigating the death of his spirit in 1975, of his sister. Maybe he was investigating the death of his spirit. Anyway, the two, the spirit, the sister, it's a little improvisation here. The death of his sister in 1975. It was as if he had just lost his sister and was mourning her while trying to understand what had occurred that had led to her death. As they spoke, the writer began to understand that he did not ever consider being as affected as his sister had been about the circumstances which led to her death. It had never occurred to him that Ina's field of inquiry could have been his as well. As a consequence, Ina's concerns became the writer's. Then history appeared unexpectedly. It had to be reckoned with. A story. A story occurs when all the events gather in a sphere and what happens converts through all the parts, including all the broken pieces, including what is being hidden, find their relationship to each other. And soon there's a whole, a sphere with a magnetic core. What is the magnetic core which has gathered the pieces, which creates this story? Wolfgang visited the writer and said casually that Ina had not wanted to take her grandmother's money. Silence. Why didn't she want to take her grandmother's money? It was her grandmother's inheritance from Bloem and Voss. What is Bloem and Voss? Bloem and Voss was the largest shipbuilding and engineering company in Germany, once the largest in the world. Long silence. Then, as if another question had been asked. Yes, she tried to commit suicide by jumping off a dock right next to Bloem and Voss, dressed elegantly with a bouquet of flowers in her hands. Ina came to Los Angeles in 1974 and committed suicide in 1975 at a remote outcropping in Death Valley, alone. Ina came to the United States from Germany to join the feminist studio workshop at the Women's Building as an artist. The FSW was not simply an educational institution. It was established simultaneously with the Women's Building, the two together becoming a cultural center and a sanctuary for young women in particular who could not thrive in the dominant culture, no more than Ina could flourish within the formalities and restrictions of her German family. The goal of cultural feminism was for women's culture and values, the unique woman's voice, the feminine, the feminist, to influence society and its institutions in ethical ways. That is, to undo patriarchy. The second wave of feminism in Los Angeles was a tsunami, but not one in which Ina would have drowned. As it turned out, it was her past, that is her family's past and history, that took her down. When meeting for the first time, the writer and Wolfgang pondered what they imagined had been the consequences of her life experiences. No reasons were given at the outset to consider anything but personal circumstances for the suicide, in the way that psychology fails to understand the impact of social, political, and historic circumstances. It was very disheartening to Wolfgang that the psychologist whom Ina had been seeing the year of her suicide did not feel she could violate Ina's privacy even 50 years later to shed any light on her action. And so it was left to the two of us, the brother who had been quite removed from her, and I, the writer, who didn't remember her at all, to see if we could understand what had driven her after 3 earlier suicide rehearsals to finally end her life. Did the ghost perceive that the writer would take on this task and that perhaps no one else would dare to get to the truth of it? Is that why the ghost has directed the brother to find by whatever means he can to have the writer write this text? In one or several of our conversations, I suggested that I might not be writing this piece on behalf of Ina, but actually on behalf of Wolfgang, that this was one form of his amends for his great-grandfather and his grandparents, and I don't know who else. Ideas regarding Ina's death were beginning to coalesce in the writer's mind into what may be an understanding. There's no doubt that the writer spoke with her classes about Chile, about war in Vietnam, and no doubt that Ina heard the writer speak of the way brutal fascism came to Chile with American help. There is evidence in Ina's writings that the Chilean coup affected her deeply. Perhaps this was one reason for Ina's affinity or respect for the writer. Learning from the writer what had occurred in Chile and how fascism was accompanied by torture must have resonated with the rise of fascism and use of torture in Nazi Germany, about which Ina must have been very knowledgeable, as it was her own history. Let's not pretend otherwise. After all, she was born into post-war Germany, 1949, 4 years after Germany's defeat. She was the granddaughter of Ina Bloom, who had married Max P. Andrea, director of the family shipping company. Lohman Vos, also the grandniece of Rudolf Blohm, who with his father, Ina's great-grandfather, Hermann Blohm, was a Hamburg co-founder of the German Fatherland Party just before the rise of the Nazi Party, reconciling the traditional right with the militant right. Hermann started Blohm and Vos in 1878. Rudolf and his brother Walter took over in 1918. In 1933, Blohm and Vos, both the shipbuilding and the aircraft companies, worked for the Nazis and the war effort. Ina could not have been innocent of Hitler and how Nazism had infected her country and that her family promoted and profited from it. She would have known that the military defeat of Germany did not imply a defeat of Hitler's ideas. She must have heard these ideas repeated in her household or her grandparents' homes. The 2 world wars were over, but the wars weren't over. Quotations from Ina's journal. January 28th, 1975, Deena says, be as precise as possible, research honestly, and write down the big taboo. 2, May 1975, Deena notes in German, A, oppression oppresses. Decadence is cynical. Chile is to a woman like a baby crying. C, Deena reads the poem Crimes Against Soft Birds by the American Amy Conger, who had been tortured in Chile under the Pinochet regime. Here are some excerpts from the poem. Crimes Against Soft Birds. Today I met a woman who was tortured in Chile. Tomorrow I will write a letter about another woman who is being tortured now. When I write this, I am thinking I want the pain to stop, but I don't know whose pain can be interrupted or how. How can I write about her pain? I can only imagine what it must be to be torn apart and to heal with the anger within, to be left with a bit of knife inside. She said, I was an American. I was treated well. They drove me through the city with my breasts exposed. They kept me blindfolded 13 days without bread and water, solitary, except when they entered to rape. I was alone in the dark, except when they tortured someone next to me. I was alone in the silence, except the animal howls next to me. I was alone in my cell when they attacked. Dee, I am still crying. These words are a repeat from earlier. Yes, she tried to commit suicide the second time by jumping off a dock right next to Blumenvos, dressed elegantly with a bouquet of flowers in her hands. From a letter in 1975 to a friend at the Feminist Studio Workshop. Hello, Sheila Ruth. The moment I want to tell you about was the moment when I jumped off the bridge in Hamburg. The freedom, the eternity, power. The moment when the cab stops in the harbor, when I scramble out, I turn and run. It is hot, crowded. A day shortly before one, I am here. I'm here again. The last time, yesterday was Sunday, and the old man with the sailor's cap was there and said, no, he wouldn't tell me how they had done it here. No one ever knew. I sat down on the bench behind his cabin, a cabin surrounded by water, the dirty, oily water of Hamburg's Elbe, Hamburg's industry, Hamburg's lungs that breathed to the sun, the soil, oily water of freighters and tugboats, hooting, bustling, freighters, steamships, warships, ships, first Imperial, then Republican ships, then with swastikas, now international, whoever pays best. Ships built by my family, my grandmother's name, looming hundreds of feet high on top of the scaffolding. But her name was Ina like mine like hers. The moment has just begun, Sheila. A covered bridge, and at the end of it, a visiting U.S. destroyer open today for the public to inspect and admire the strength and perfection of our powerful ally. I am running. It is a bright day, and then the shadow and the wooden planks of the bridge. I stop short. People, a man, sailors, mothers with children, strollers. I could not wait any longer, waiting to be called to lunch, dinner, refusing the blue bow stuck into my hair from behind. Why do you always dress so dark? Why do you always dress so dark? And what a hot day. And would you get the napkins? I move slowly, pale, withdrawn, my hair tied back. Can I help? I lift the tea cart onto the veranda. Grandfather comes and grandmother, not Ina though. She died long ago. He has fine, smooth, gentle hands. He peels a pear. Maybe it is breakfast. He does that for breakfast or for dessert. I stare, and they talk around me. I wish I could think of something to say, but it is numb and gray, and they talk around me, smile at me, and would you like some more potatoes? And they talk about newspapers, reports, the garden. Grandfather stares ahead in the distance, in the past, business for the company, and all the Sundays spent when Ina was alive, having formal dinner with her parents, the Bloms. And I am 20 now. I put back the napkins, bring grandfather his vermouth, stare into the garden. The bushes are green and cheerful, and everybody sighs. What a nice day. And I go up the 2 stories to my room. I am again here on the bridge. This is the moment. The man coming towards me is too far away, and the woman with a child has just passed me. It is safe. I dash to the left, climb onto the railing. 1 second, a glimpse, and the rest is mine. Thank you. That's Ina and John.
Again, Deena, stunning. I feel breathless with all of that. And Ina is quite a writer. That last piece you just read is just exquisite. And okay, whoever pays best, the Nazis or the international flag or whatever, and then let's pass the muffins, that she's living in. It's just extraordinary. And then all that you've done there and the rest of it is amazing. And I'm thinking about you coming onto this journal of hers and reading her work for the first time and getting to know her. Thank you, Ina. Thank you, sweetheart. So we will have some time for conversation between these two extraordinary writers. I'm struck, I think probably I'm not the only one, that we are truly in the mystery here. That this book was brought to Deena, a Jewish American woman with ancestors from Eastern Europe.
Belarus.
Janko was, excuse me?
Belarus.
There we go. Belarus, right? Janko was given this extraordinary story. I assume European ancestry, grew up Christian. Am I basically correct about that, Janko?
Yeah, I was raised
Mm-hmm.
Catholic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right? So we're you guys are writing across boundaries. A Jewish woman is writing about a German woman. A European American man is writing about a Palestinian girl. And yet that's just surface stuff. We're inside something so extraordinary and so mysterious. And the two of you what you're willing to carry is, I bow to you. So thank you. So we will have a conversation now. I'm just going to be asking questions and asking the two of them to answer and comment as they wish. And we'll let that, kind of proceed together. So starting with Janko, but we'd love to hear from both of you. Just in terms of your work as writers, how do the books that you're going to write come to you, and how does this particular book that we're looking at, how does this happen? Again, you could talk all afternoon, but what would you comment about that for us right now, starting with Janko?
Well, first of all, the title of Deena's book, Writing for Your Life, I mean, that describes why I why I
Yeah.
write. It's part of, it's survival. This book, The Wire Worker, had such an unlikely origin. I was in Illinois, in my hometown, on the Illinois River, and I saw an article in the local paper about a circus for an actual circus for Palestinian youth and Israeli youth in Israel. I never planned to write about that part of the world. I'd read a whole lot, but I didn't think I would ever write about it. And but I began first out of curiosity, reading more and more, and then after a while, I felt like um, ultimately, what I end up writing about is what haunts me or what brings joy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I'm actually doing the writing, I'm not thinking about motive. I'm just feeling that I have to do it. There's a sense of that in my body. It's actually a physical feeling. And I can only really describe my motive afterwards. With this book, I've read it mountains of books about Palestine and Israel, history and analysis. And this novel, The Role of Specificity, I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at what the occupation does to one Palestinian body. Her family also, but mainly her. And the fact that she is an athlete puts more of a spotlight on this one body. So you can, you can read lots and lots of history, and that's great. I encourage all that. But this really narrows it down. What's it like, the occupation for one body? That's my response.
I don't think I choose any of the books I write. I think they're given. Uh, and and that we're called to write something, and then we have no choice, and we just hope that we can be good enough to do it. One book I wrote, The Woman Who Slept with Men to Take the War Out of Them. It was a title that came across a dream I had as if I was watching a movie. You get a line like that, you don't have a choice. What in the world does, if you're a writer, you're going to have to write that book. You don't know what it is. Once I was walking through the desert. This always happens after I've finished a book and I don't know what I'm going to write. So once I was hiking in the desert, and a voice said, she's a climatologist. No, I don't know. I don't know anything. So, of course, I had to learn climatology. And as I said in the reading, I didn't want to write this book. I was writing another book. I'm still writing that other book. It will be called Broken Lambs. But I had no choice. And one thing after another came and said, you must write this book. And then the resemblance between Nazi Germany and what was happening in the United States, what is happening, became more and more obvious to all of us. And then the election, and then there it is.
Thank you. The it's interesting, the two characters that are at the center of your books, two young women, artists, activists in their ways, and one actually lived. And so maybe, Deena, you could say you're writing nonfiction in your book, a ghost written by Ina. One, a literary character, Janko's. To me, they both live as archetypal literary characters who will live on in the canon. And so I'd love to hear you. We'd love to hear you talk about these two women, these two young women, as artists and activists, and what you see as relationships between them, and the role of art in war and occupation, and the role of women in these kind of moments, or whatever else you want to say about your characters. So we'll start with Deena.
As you say that, what comes to mind is what does it mean to be a real human being? And Native tribes often speak about themselves as they're the real human beings. These characters, they are real. They are complex. Amal is amazing, and she haunts me the way Ina haunts me. I think the two of them might have had a very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
And maybe they are having this conversation
Right.
right now. Ina's brother wanted to bring her out as an artist, and she was very concerned with being an artist, and art was very important to her family. But when I met her, I met that war-torn psyche, and it was a warning. And Amal is a warning to us. She tells us what torture is and what oppression is. and confinement.
Um, yeah, I'll respond to that also. Amal is 16 years old, 17 by the end of the book. Um, she reminds the reader many times that she's an artist and an athlete. She has agency and she tells you about it. And at one point, she tells the reader in plain terms her purpose in life. And she says to humble every man with a gun, everyone with power. That's why I was born. Okay, there's art and resistance together, and that um, for me, it goes to the heart of who this girl is and who Ina is too. They're companions.
I just have to say this. Do you hear the way Janko was talking about her? He's not talking about a literary character. He's not talking about someone he created. He is talking about a person that he had the privilege and the honor to bring to life.
Yes.
Which is how all the great novelists understand their characters. That the ones that they are living. There are other realms, and they're in them. I love the idea that they're talking to each other right now, Ina and Amal, and
Well, they're right
um,
here. Can't you feel that? They're right here.
100%, 100%,
Mhm.
navigating it all. But there's this also way. I just want to quickly say here's one of Ina's paintings. She's a
Mm.
gifted painter. That's why she goes all the way to LA to the Women's Building to paint. So the paintings are in Deena's book. And there's a way in which um, at one point she says, Deena calls it a rehearsal for her suicide attempts. They all have their own aspects of performance art, as we see with so gifted artists, fierce women who we can follow, living in the shadow of war and occupation. So thank you for bringing them to us. There are so many connections between both of these books. And we just love to hear any thoughts you have about the two characters, the two books, the timing. Janko, would you start with that?
Um, yeah, Dina's book, it cycles, it goes back to the past and cycles into the present. It goes back to 1933 and the rise of Hitler and the Nazis. And then it gives you what Dina was holding, what she had to carry, what ultimately she could not carry. And it takes it to our time. And how, as I was reading Dina's book, Ina's book, Wolfgang's book, our book, I had a hard time distinguishing how were the Nazis different than what we're seeing now? I don't know. It seems like fundamentally it is pretty much the same. And in my book, what's happening to Palestinians, I want to quote, at one point, Dina in the book says, well, let me just read it from the book. I can find it. Give me just one moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I'm going to take this moment just to remind everyone if you have questions that you want to have addressed, do put them in the chat.
um, Dina says, the writer feels responsible spiritually and in all other ways for the criminal actions of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whom she never met, is not related to, and who lives in and governs another country, simply because she is Jewish, Jewish, and she has been unable to stop him. And when I read that, I thought of a mostly forgotten Israeli poet, a great poet, Avat Yeshurun. In the aftermath of the Nakba in 1948, when at least 750,000 Palestinians were displaced, Avat Yeshurun wrote, "The Holocaust of the Jews of Europe and the Holocaust of the Arabs of Eretz Israel are one Holocaust. The two of them stare each other directly in the face. It is of this that I speak." And in The Wire Walker, when Amal is in Tel Aviv, she befriends Tali Glasman, the juggler, Tali's mother, Rebecca, and some other friends as well. But she has a deep connection with Mrs. Glasman, Rebecca Glasman, who sends Amal a letter toward the end of the book, which reads in part, "At this point, most Israelis seldom, if ever, consider the fate of Palestinians. As a nation, we have backed away from our deepest truth. The Holocaust ends when the suffering ends." And that means for all people. Roughly 7 million Jewish Israelis and 7 million Palestinians on this little strip of land. So I feel like that's how our books are really, they're companions. They're inseparable.
You know, the the relationships just take my breath away. And Janko and I are both fans of another book called The Paragon by Colin McCann, which is essentially the story. Fantastic.
That is a brilliant book. Go ahead, Deena.
It's the story of an Israeli man and a Palestinian man, both of whom lose their young daughters. So here we have the women again and the young women. They lose their young daughters to the wars. And the tragedy of that was so great for each of them that they had no choice but to start combatants against the war, or combatants for peace.
Yeah.
So you have to take that in. The tragedy was so great that the only thing they could do was start together combatants for peace. These are real people. They've been here in the States speaking. And I can't separate those young girls. I can't separate those girls from our characters. I mean, and I can't talk about this as if it's books. I feel like there are these historic voices. I think Janko feels it the same way. I read his book again yesterday. That's what I did all day. I just read his book. I got to the end of it. I was able to go to sleep. It wasn't the first reading, but I needed to have it right here. There's a sense of living in both books, of living in history that is acting right now.
Yeah. Right.
And these people are here right now. And then what Janko just read, we haven't been able to stop them. I don't know what to say to the Iranians. I'm sorry. I mean, that's just so awful to say, but we tried to stop them and we haven't been able to stop them. And we keep hoping that the books that telling these stories, and that if they feel so alive, that it may help to gather a community of consciousness that together will find some way to stop these times.
So we keep going deeper and deeper into the books, you as writers, into the characters, and then the current day and the mystery of it all. And so just acknowledging what we're all carrying so deeply in our hearts, which is a moment when truly great global events are shattering much of the world as we understand it. We can't imagine what's going to come. And we'd love to hear your thoughts about present day events. You were starting with that, Deena. But truly, I mean, the stories that you all are telling are the precursors to the moment we're in. You know, there's no taking them apart. So, anything you might add to or offer us on those thoughts about current day? And again, Deena, why don't you just continue from where you were? We'll go to Deena.
Um, while we're devastating Iran and Lebanon, including apparently in Israel has been spraying southern Lebanon with something similar to or a second uh, level of Agent Orange. While we're doing that, I'm also aware that we're not paying attention to what's happening in the West Bank. What is happening now in the West Bank is horrific.
Yeah.
And when Janko writes about detention centers, when he describes what happens in, in detention in Israel on those three occasions, that's what's happening right now in our country to
Right.
our neighbors.
Right.
So I think Ina came to bring awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I would be so adamant about all of this if I hadn't gone through this experience with her. But the relationship between what happened in Nazi Germany beginning in 1933 is exactly what's happening in our country in the last 15 months. And it's right now. And we're called to be awake.
Yeah.
As hard as it is, as much as you want to tune out, as much as you say, I can't bear it, I have PTSD, whatever, this is happening and it's up to us.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the books tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can definitely vouch for things getting far worse in the West Bank. I was last in the West Bank in January and February of 2025, and an area that I was in near the village of Al Mughayr, it's really beautiful and lots of olive trees. And I stayed for about 2 weeks with a family, an extended family that raised sheep. And that I lived in the caves and the tents with them. And they're just lovely people. And in August of 2025, I was not there at the time, I was back home, but they sent me video footage of Israelis bulldozing thousands of olive trees. And keep in mind, these trees, many of them over 300 years old. You know, the Palestinians have such a deep love for the land. They raise these trees like they raise their children, with tremendous care. Um, so it's just escalating. And near Susia, where I also was in last year, which is in Massaferyata, the southernmost part of the West Bank. There were two Palestinian men who were executed this month, just executed. and nobody held accountable. My friend Nili Belkind, who was born in Israel, her family, I believe, arrived in Palestine in maybe in the early 30s to escape anti-Semitism in Europe. And she describes what is happening now in the West Bank, in Gaza, as the final solution, the final solution. And but I want to say there's so much resistance. There's the word samud in Arabic, steadfastness. People don't give up. They don't give up. And I want to tell you that the Nablus Circus School is still going. The theater is still going. The theater, they used to travel around the West Bank and do tours. They're not able to do that since October 7th. They can't. They just have no, they're locked into Nablus, but they're still going. So there's resistance here in the US and there. And there's a lot of resistance, a lot of creativity.
Beautiful. It's actually endless, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, watching Minneapolis, who would have guessed?
yeah,
Right? I mean, there's just it's many many layers deep. We don't know it yet, but we'll find it as things keep going.
yeah.
And Dina, I just want to mention your knowledge of World War II is so deep because you wrote The Other Hand, which is about Germany and World War II. So I just want to mention that you really understand of what you speak.
Well, yeah. The other hand is the story of an American astronomer um, whose life and history was involved. Well, what the book opens with is that there are two koans of the 20th century, the Holocaust and the bomb. And so I had to learn astrophysics to write the book. This is like, you don't have a choice about a book or how you're going to spend your life. None of that. So I learned as best as I could astrophysics. And I had to learn what it was like um, during the time of the Holocaust. So I had to, among other things, make a pilgrimage to, I went to 10
Right,
concentration camps.
right.
And what came to me more than anything else was that never again means this must never again happen anywhere in the world to anyone.
To anyone, yes.
And then
Thank
I
you.
read that in your book.
Mhm, mhm.
I can't
Yeah,
tell you.
so the other hand, if you haven't read it yet or you haven't read it in a while, it's really worth going back to in this moment as well. One thing that when we were talking about all of this together, the three of us, the question of what happens to the land and the earth during these kind of moments is we're lost in our own stories. We can lose this, and it's so horrific. It's hard to speak of. But you two both track this very carefully with great heart. So, Janko, would you speak about that question a bit?
Yeah, well, to start, I'll say nothing is more harmful to this earth than war and the preparation for war. Um, I'll tell you a little bit about my experience in Vietnam. Um, I was assigned to be a medic in an infantry battalion, and my unit operated in areas where resistance forces often disappeared into tunnels, the Cu Chi area, which is famous for its tunnels. Um, so if we couldn't find, the Vietnamese, our so-called enemy, our commanders called the Air Force to destroy all that concealed or sustained the enemy. So planes bombed rice paddies, forests, fields, rivers, sometimes villages, and defoliated huge tracts of land. And I was there about 6 weeks, and it occurred to me, we're fighting the earth. We're fighting the whole Vietnamese earth. If we couldn't find the Vietnamese. We could, and we did, destroy their land. I want to tell you briefly, after the war, I became really an environmentalist. I studied ecology at UC Berkeley. And one class is worth a brief mention. Arnold Schultz, who taught that class, he was unpredictable. For our final exam, he led us outside onto the campus, and we were to walk about and then choose 1 square inch to write about as an ecosystem. That is, to write about the relationships between organisms, about what sustained this patch of earth. So as I was writing, I remembered that Cobra gunships, which I saw a lot of in Vietnam, could put a bullet in every square inch of a football field in less than a minute, And at the same time, I was amazed by the complexity of life in minuscule, this 1 inch, which was part of and sustained by everything around it. And I thought of the Whitman line, I believe a leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars. Okay. And so, the whole union of life was there. And I was seeing what war does and what another way can do. If we can honor that inch of land, we can honor the earth.
Mm.
When you read The Wire Walker, you will be struck by Amal's passion for light. Whatever else is going on, she's feeling the light in her, and she's looking for the light, and she is completely connected to this tiny strip of sky that's above her. She speaks about what she can't see. And when you speak about, which I've heard from so many people, the care with which Palestinians raise their olive trees that Israel then raises. Different spelling, Razes. It's a madness.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not as an excuse, but for us to understand what trauma does, what violence does to everybody. I don't know as a species if we can recover from what we've done, just as I wish I knew, but I don't know if the earth can recover from what we're doing. But I do feel that therefore we have to be as sane as possible and create little niches of sanity. And we have to take care of the earth as carefully as we can, so that there are these little pockets, these 1 inches, which are not destroyed by bombardment, but are actually preserved. And there's that book, I don't remember the name of the writer, who wrote a book called 1 Inch of Silence. He looked for a place and he found it in the mountains in Washington State, where there was 1 inch of silence, and he wanted to see what happened in that place. It's madness. It's absolute madness to destroy an olive tree. I mean, just like it is madness to want to cut down. Oh, yes. Thank you, Eileen Gordon Hampton. You're right. For the 1 inch of silence. It is, sorry, I lost it in the madness.
It is madness. I love these small inches because, and what can come through, because okay, the world that we've created, no, not sustainable. It's not going to make it. We've known that all our lives in a way. But what comes up through the weeds and gets born again, those are the things that we are all tending now. Those are all individual 1 inches. So there is what comes next as opposed to endings, I think. I think there's what comes next. We're all about that. So we have 2 minutes and then we're going to go to audience questions. But we wanted to end with, we're all trying to find our ways of survival and bearing all this. So if you would each just mention what's your way of moving through this and finding ways to survive and hold your heart. Deena, could you just briefly start?
Well, I really want to say that one of the ways I survive is by being aware. And I don't want to leave that out of the equation.
Good.
I need to know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And if I know what's happening, then I am called to meet it. And when I'm called to meet it, when I'm writing, when I'm speaking out and being with you now, I'm okay. I'm okay in those moments. And also, for me, the fact that Ina came in the way she came, to me, is evidence of the presence of the spirits and the way they can be. That's very deep for me. This connection between Janko and myself and our books, it's crazy that we're having this conversation. You may think about it sometime what came about. This is really crazy and magical. And I think we're being helped by the spirits. And of course, there's the earth, which we are bombarding, and which some of us are, as best as we can, tenderly uh, taking care of. And because it's being bombarded, you have to love it more. So, and if I'm loving the earth and being with it, it's reciprocal. So those are my ways.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, if I'm loving the earth, I'll tell you, even now in these unspeakably difficult times, if I'm loving the earth, I'm happy. And I really, um, and Deena, you spoke of awareness, and for me, that's, meditation and writing, and then being part of communities. I've learned how to respond to ICE actions here in Albuquerque, and learned how to be a street medic, at demonstrations and marches. So I'm a medic again. And, there's always something. I want to read a very short poem to close, and there's an anthology coming out in May called Convergence, The Environmental Impacts of War, and I have a few poems in there. This one is really short, and what the publishers asked was that besides the poem, they want a little bit of explication. Here's the poem. Title: 3 kilometers from a village destroyed by bombs. A girl kneels in a garden, rescues a grasshopper from a puddle. Hop, hop, gone. And joy shakes her awake as geese fly under the moon. So this is my explication for the poem. In the middle of a war, a child saves the life of a grasshopper. I did not see this happen. I imagined the girl, the garden, the grasshopper, the puddle, the geese flying under the moon. Yes, I imagined the poem, every detail, but the girl's compassion and joy align with the web of knowledge that sustains all of our lives. Is there not always some being to assist or to celebrate? Someone with whom we can consciously share the precious gift of life.
Janko, can you read the poem again? Just the poem.
Yeah, 3 kilometers from a village destroyed by bombs. A girl kneels in a garden, rescues a grasshopper from a puddle. Hop, hop, gone. And joy shakes her awake as geese fly under the moon.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you for asking him to do that, to read it again. That perfect. And I will add that part of what makes it possible for all of us is what we're doing now, which is being together and naming what matters and being in community. So being with all of you today, and in addition to you two, that's how my heart keeps going as well. So now we get to bring in Kristen, who has been very, very carefully, I assume, going through the questions in the chat, and will bring forth some of those questions. We have about 15 minutes or so, a little less for that. Kristen, hi.
Hello, and thank all three of you. This has been incredible. We didn't have many questions, so I think we've probably got 4 or 5 in the next 15 minutes or so. And I think, Janko and Deena, as you were talking with Carolyn, some of the questions that were asked were addressed. I'm going to start with one. We were just talking about the impacts on the earth of war, as well as on people and beings. I wonder if you could each speak to what you feel or believe is at the heart of these violations of life.
Okay, I'll give that a try. War and preparation for war are the biggest business there is. It's so profitable. There's money and power, dominance. Um, it's patriarchy on steroids, and this is what we're dealing with. I mean, I feel like that's the heart of it. Money and power and patriarchy, and the opposite of what we need of a world of kinship where we feel our community with other beings. It goes totally opposite direction. And I think most people in the world do not want it, but the people in power certainly do.
Thank you.
I'm so aware of all the years that I spent with many asking, how did we come to this? What are the causes of this culture? And I guess in what I'm teaching now, I'm trying to find ways to change our minds in the ways, and that's what the 19 ways are, ways so that our minds are not in the forms and values of imperial culture, or and it's not only patriarchy, and it's, or maybe these are just words for each other. It's power, it's money, but it's more pervasive than that. It really, for me right now, is the thinking of Euro-American culture, which is dominating everywhere. And the fact that we came in and tried to wipe out indigenous culture, that we genocided native people, we genocided intelligence, we genocided heart, we genocided the mind that we need to survive. And it's like if people in Israel understood the culture from which someone raises an olive tree, they would be different. Instead of thinking that is not up to Western culture, or white supremacy is so intelligent. No, I don't think so. I think the old traditional ways of spirit and earth connected people uh, are the ways. I mean,
Thank you both. We talked a little bit earlier, or at least acknowledged that you were writing across boundaries. And so one of our listeners wondered, how do you approach writing protagonists or characters whose point of views or ethnicities or genders may be different than your own?
Yeah, I'll start on that. Yeah, I mean, my narrator does not look anything like me, and she lives far, far away from where I live. Um, and, we're at a time where people that have been colonized and oppressed and enslaved, and the millions who still are, they want to tell their own stories in their own ways. And that's it's about time, and all those doors need to be open. And at the same time, in in fiction, at least as the way I understand fiction, there has to be plenty of room for empathy and imagination and research. I couldn't have done this book without a lot of research. I couldn't have done it without experiencing trauma myself, a lot of trauma. I tried many times to write the story from a white perspective of a white male on the periphery of, circus, and I was, just reporting on the lives of wire walkers and trapeze artists. I tried several different ways to do that, including I cast myself as a clown in a circus, reporting from a distance. It was all nonsense, okay? It wouldn't go anywhere. And then it was a night when I thought, oh, I shouldn't be writing about this stuff anyway. And then it was a night when I hardly slept. And I got up and I wrote for like almost 6 hours. And it was that girl's voice. It's like what Deena said earlier. A book it's given. You can write something you think you're supposed to write, but good luck. That's probably not going to happen. And something else will emerge. So that's my response.
You know, once upon a time when I was a young writer, um, our concern was really whether a woman could write a male character that was um, true, and whether the male writers were writing any women that were true. And there is this saying that um, the story of war is always written by the victor. So you never hear the other side of it. Or that I'm now trying to write from the perspective truly of a non-human, a more than human being. In La Vieja, I really tried to get as close as I could to the bear. But maybe it was the bear that was trying to get as close to me as was possible so that his voice, in this case, it was a male bear, could come through me. In A Rain of Nightbirds, I write Native American, two Native American people that's set in the Four Corners Reservation. I wouldn't bring a book like that out without asking someone, does this work? You know, um, does this ring true? And in the beginning, I would run my books. Well, I always run them by other people, but I'd run them by my friends who were male writers and saying, is this guy true? Is this how is this how men, or is this how a man might present himself? No generalities. Empathy. That's what Janko says. Empathy is a great gift and one you want to cultivate.
Just to add on that, when I finished The Wire Walker, I ran it by my circus friends in Nablus. They were first readers.
Um, it's obvious from everything you've shared today that Ina and Amal are and were very real for you in the writing of these books. Um, Are they with you still? Are there ways in which they have changed your life, how you think about the world, how you move in the world, and if so, how?
Well, I'm obsessed with, obviously, with fascism and the need to for the internal inquiry of how are we colluding. That's just obsessive to me. And that's Ina. And she keeps showing me that it's happening. It's still happening. It's still happening. And I don't know that this makes sense. It's not that it was right that she committed suicide, but it makes sense that she committed suicide, that the anguish we feel for having collaborated, it's all right to feel that anguish. For having participate.
Yeah, as for Amal, I think about her every day, and I think about her resilience, her creativity, how she will not give up, and she has this light in her which she carries everywhere. And when times are tough, I mean, she really is aware of earth and sky, that she's living, among a vastness. Even if she's in that skinny alley, where you can reach out and touch both walls, she is aware of earth and sky, in her profession, her wire walking. You have earth, sky, and you walk a line between the two. That's her art.
Mm. So I think earlier in the conversation, you both suggested in your own way that in bringing these books out into the world, perhaps they could contribute to a shift in consciousness. I'm wondering if you view Amal and Ina as maybe more than inspiration, but also guides for people who may be struggling to find their own resilience in this moment. Deena, you mentioned earlier, some people can't sit with the reality of what's happening because they've had so much trauma. And yet I feel like these two young women both give us different ways of thinking about how to be with awareness. And Amal in particular, her resilience is it's sort of contagious and inspiring in a way. If we can all remember earth and sky, we can keep coming back to that.
I think Amal is resilient, and Ina was not. But Amal could touch her connections, and Ina had no connections, no one who would participate in that with her. I have other characters who sustain me. So I would go to La Vieja if I needed resilience, and I would go to A Reign of Nightbirds. And there are people who are aware and they are resilient. And I'll go to Amal. I mean,
I
she
just
doesn't
very
belong to
briefly,
Janko. She belongs to all of us, if I may say
right.
so.
Yeah.
I just want to very briefly say, as someone whose sister committed suicide, this is a story I know very, very well, more than I would ever wish. I don't entirely agree myself that Ina was not resilient. I think what she did was incredible, and the life she lived was incredible, and what she was willing to carry and speak about during her lifetime was incredible. So, just comment.
Thank you.
So, Kristen, are there any other one real quick questions from the audience that we should make sure we address, or have we?
I
just
think
about
we've covered most
Great,
of, yeah,
perfect,
the
wonderful.
big themes. Yep, thank
Right.
you.
Kristen, thank you
Sure,
for
thank you.
doing that. Thank you.
I'm just going to drop back into the chat for anyone who may have missed it the first time, how you can find Deena and Janko after today's conversation and where you can buy these wonderful books.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you so much, everyone.